Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting us into your space today. We've got a lot of different things going on at Christ Community, and we would love for you to be a part of them. Head on over to our website, check out our Coming Up page, and you can see all the different ways you can get connected. Also, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this via podcast, or however you're engaging with this, feel free to like and subscribe. That way, whenever we have new content for you, it lets you know, and you can enjoy it again. Enjoy the message.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see you. Hi. My name is Stetson. If we've never met before, I'm really glad that you're here. 10 or so years ago, back when it was still airing, my wife and I, we were really into the show Downton Abbey. And it is set in the 1920s, and it follows this wealthy, aristocratic British family that lives in a small castle on the English countryside, and it is very British, and it is very upper class, and it is very highbrow, and you feel upper class when you watch it. And we just loved it, like, for whatever reason. Maybe it was the dry, sarcastic British humor that I really adore. We loved it so much that during that time, there was one year where the season premiere was going to air on TV, and the Crest Theater downtown, they decided to have this event where they were going to play the airing of the season premiere in one of their theaters, and some friends of ours told us about it. And so late one winter's night in 2012, I found myself sitting in a theater surrounded by much older women who were all wearing these large Victorian-era dresses, who clearly believed that they were born in the wrong time period. And this show was their way of experiencing everything that they could never experience. And sitting among them, I felt very out of place and very underdressed, and it was hard to see the screen past their very large hats. We loved the show, but we never finished it, which is really unlike me. You see, the show, it had its fair share of tragedy. Like, it's a drama set in the 1920s. What do you expect? Like, there's disease and accidents and all these random things that happen. But there's this one season where something happened that felt different from all that. There's a season where someone did something truly evil to one of the nicest characters in the show. And after that, we didn't want to watch it anymore. And it wasn't like this moral boycott of like, we don't watch shows with this type of thing, type of deal. It was more like, I don't know, something about it. It just like we got hurt and betrayed, and we lost hope in the show, and we didn't want to watch it anymore. And again, the show had tons of tragedy, but I think there's a difference between something tragic and something that's evil that just hits harder. Like, maybe it's something about evil happens when someone like intentionally does it. There's something about evil that just causes people to lose hope. In a similar way, in this season of reality that all of us are sharing together, I think we've gotten pretty good at tuning out all the tragedy, just the hard things going on everywhere, all the time. But lately this season, it seems like there's been more and more things happening that just feel evil. Like massacres and war crimes and people in positions of trust and power taking advantage of the vulnerable in disgusting ways, and parents losing their children due to violence, and children becoming orphans due to violence. And it's just like this sea of tragedy. There's something about evil that just hits harder and stands out and can cause us to lose hope. I've been having more conversations lately where offhandedly people have been saying things like, well, this is the end of the world as we know it. Society's going downhill. I've stopped caring. I don't care anymore. People are losing hope, and they don't want to watch anymore. You may or may not know that there's this resource called the Suicide and Crisis Hotline. You just dial 988 and you get put in touch with them. And it's this incredible resource, and it's for people who are experiencing this deep moment of hopelessness. They can call in and they're looking for hope of any kind. And as great as it is, the hotline has been encountering a problem. There are so many people calling in wanting to talk to somebody that they don't have enough staff or trained volunteers to take everyone's calls right away. And so some people are getting placed on hold. So someone's in their moment of like deep hopelessness, their experience is calling this number and waiting on hold, listening to that music you listen to when you wait on hold, which is not good for anyone's mental health, especially if you're in a crisis. And what's happening is some of these people, many of these people, they get tired of waiting and they hang up before anyone at the hotline is able to pick up the other line. And the hotline, to try to remedy this situation, because they don't have enough staff or trained volunteers and they can't train them quick enough to take everyone's calls right away, the next best thing that they thought that they could do to help fix the situation was to change the music that people listen to while they wait on hold, in the hopes that if they found something inspiring and hopeful and uplifting enough, it would inspire the people waiting to wait longer until someone could take their call. So they did all this research and these studies, and they surveyed a bunch of people, and they felt like they found it, like here's the song. And so they switched it, and it made a little bit of a difference, but not a lot. People are still hanging up, getting tired of waiting. And when I heard that story, in kind of a sad way, it made me think about the Christian church, or maybe just Christian culture in general, because it feels like in times when we are face to face with something that is just overwhelmingly evil, and we're trying to wrap our minds around that, and people are losing hope, it seems sometimes like the best we can do is change the music we're listening to while we're waiting for God to show up. Like we have these phrases that we repeat over and over again, like God has a plan, trust in his timing, lean not on your own understanding. He works in mysterious ways. His ways are higher than our ways. He's in control. He'll take your call as soon as he can. Please don't hang up. There's this story in the Bible that you may have heard of before, where the disciples and Jesus are in a boat, and they're sailing across the Sea of Galilee, and they get caught in this storm. And the disciples are worried that they're going to drown, and they find Jesus sleeping in the boat, and they're trying to wake him up, saying, "Don't you even care?" As desensitized as we've become to all of the tragedy going on, every once in a while we hear or see or watch something that is just so overwhelmingly evil that we can't ignore it, and it just hits harder, and we get sad or we get angry or we start to lose hope, and it kind of feels like we're all in a boat in a storm and we're sinking and God is asleep. Don't you even care? This summer, we're in the series where we're looking at these different psalms that were written by David. And he has this way of writing where he is just so honest and open and transparent with how he's really feeling and what he's really experiencing. And we're looking at these psalms to see what we can learn from them. And one of these psalms was written by David immediately after he heard about something that happened that was just so truly evil. And the psalm he wrote isn't what you would expect. It takes place before David became king. A man named Saul was king at the time, and Saul was really jealous of David, and David found out that Saul was going to try to kill him. So David runs for his life, getting hunted down, and the very first place that he goes to is this town just north of Jerusalem called Nob, and Nob is the town where all of the priests live and where their families live and their livestock. So David goes there and he finds a priest and he tells them that Saul had sent him on a mission and he needs supplies for his journey. So the priest gives David what he needs and David goes on his way. But then later on, Saul finds out that someone in the town of Nob had helped David. So he goes to Nob and he finds the priest that helped David and he questions him. And he said, "Did you give David supplies? And the priest said, yes, but I had no idea he was a fugitive. Like he said that you had sent him. And Saul is so angry about this that he has every single priest, man, woman, child, and even animal in the whole town killed. Nothing and no one is left alive. So while David's on the run, he hears about this, and when he does, he says, it's my fault all of them are dead. And it's while David is on the run, getting hunted down, and it's after he hears about this terrible thing that has happened that he writes Psalm 52. And it's not what you'd expect. It goes like this. Why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? The steadfast love of God endures all the day. Your tongue plots destruction like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You love evil more than good, and lying more than speaking what is right. You love all words that devour, O deceitful tongue. But God will break you down forever. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous shall see and fear and shall laugh at him, saying, see the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and sought refuge in his own destruction. But I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. I will thank you forever because you have done it. I will wait for your name, for it is good in the presence of the godly. This is not a situation where there's room for hope. Like a massacre just happened. You can't undo that. Like there's no room for rescue. What's done is done. But in the face of that, David writes a psalm of hope. Like he's on the run, getting hunted down, and he just heard about a whole town getting slaughtered. And it's kind of his fault. And he writes, I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. I will trust in the steadfast love of God forever and ever. It's kind of like David is in a boat in a storm and he's laughing. For David to write this after something like that means one of two things must be true. Either David is delusional and he's lost touch with reality, or he knows something. How is it possible for David to find hope in the face of such evil? Is it possible for us? Let's look through this psalm and see if we can see what David sees. Let's look at the first 4 verses again and how he starts this. He writes, why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? The steadfast love of God endures all the day. Your tongue plots destruction like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You love evil more than good, and lying more than speaking what is right. You love all words that devour, a deceitful tongue. Okay, it doesn't seem like David is delusional. It doesn't seem like he's lost touch with reality. In fact, he seems really grounded in it. He's being very objective. He's acknowledging the fact that there are people out there who brag about the evil things that they've done. They take pride in it. They love it. They love to do evil things more than good. Evil things occur because people are choosing to do them. There are people who love to deceive and divide and cause destruction. It doesn't seem like David is pretending like everything's fine. He's not minimizing the problem. He's acknowledging the fact evil exists. And evil things happen because evil people do them. You may have noticed a word as we were reading through these verses that you didn't recognize. It's the Hebrew word selah, and it's a musical term. Psalms are songs, and selah is this musical term that instructs the people who are singing or listening to the psalm together to stop and reflect on what was just said. And it's at the beginning of the psalm where David opens up by acknowledging that evil exists, evil things happen, that he wants us to stop and reflect on the fact that that is true, which is something we don't always do. I think a lot of us, myself included, tend to cope with the evil things that we hear about by trying to avoid it. Maybe we try to block it out. I remember in 2020 when I got to the point where I just didn't want to read the news anymore, and I just stopped. Maybe we try to ignore it. Maybe we've gotten really good at tuning it out, or maybe we minimize it, saying it's not really that big of a deal. It's getting exaggerated. It's just kind of getting blown up for entertainment purposes. Or maybe we tell ourselves we don't really need to worry about it because we're not directly impacted by it. It's not my problem. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there's something really healthy about not getting dragged down by all the negativity out there. But I think there's a difference between that and ignoring reality altogether because we're scared of what it could mean if that exists. I think sometimes we avoid things because we are scared of what it could mean if those things are there. For example, when's the last time you've been to the dentist? Maybe it's been recent, but I've spoken to a couple people lately where it's been like 5 years since they've gone. Have you ever been driving and your car starts to make a noise that's unfamiliar and you tell yourself, it'll probably go away, like it'll fix itself? Because that's how cars work, right? They fix themselves. Isn't that awesome? Some people, they literally tape over their check engine light to make the problem go away. Is there a doctor's appointment you've been putting off that you really should go to? Sometimes we avoid things because we're scared of what it could mean if they're true, if they exist. And I think sometimes Christians, we tend to avoid the evil things that we hear about because for some people it doesn't work with what they believe. If this evil thing is happening, then how could God be loving? If this is happening, then how could God care? If this is happening, where is God? Those are scary questions that we don't like to think about. But if we're going to learn anything from this psalm, I think we need to do what David is instructing us to do here. Can we bravely together practice a moment of Selah and just acknowledge the fact that evil exists? Lately, there have been some really terrible things happening. And if that's true, that raises some questions. Where is God in all that? What is he doing about that? Well, that's where David goes next. Let's read verse 5-7 and then go back to verse 1 again. But God will break you down forever. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous shall see and fear and shall laugh at him, saying, see the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and sought in the refuge of his own destruction. And then verse 1, why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? The steadfast love of God endures all the day. So God is not asleep. He is not absent. He's not doing nothing. He's actually very actively always responding to evil. And he's responding to evil with his steadfast love. The Hebrew word there is hesed. Hesed is this deep-rooted, loyal, never wavering, constant, never going to abandon you type of love. And love itself is the most powerful force in the universe. There is nothing that can withstand it. Love endures anything that gets thrown at it. It is always the last thing standing, always. And it is so important for us to understand that God is not fighting fire with fire. He's not responding to evil with more evil, or to armies with armies, or to tyrants with tyranny, or to death with even more death. He is responding to evil with something far more powerful than those things, his steadfast love. And his love works differently than those things. It tears down defensive walls. It brings things out of hiding. It reaches down to the roots of evil and pulls the entire thing out so that it can't return. This kind of love does not work quickly or violently, which is usually how I want God to respond when I read about something evil that's occurred. But for God to respond quickly or violently would only cause more evil or just be evil in and of itself. Like if I'm being really honest, there are times where I want God to respond to evil with more evil. That feels right in the moment, but that's not how God works. In other words, God doesn't mow over the weeds. He doesn't rip them out at the base. He reaches all the way down to the tips of the roots and pulls the entire thing out so it doesn't have a chance of coming back. If we are waiting for God to respond to evil quickly or violently, we are going to be waiting a very long time. And it's going to seem like God isn't really doing anything because that's not how God responds to evil. But if we were to look and see how God is responding to evil with love, then we might begin to see how God is responding to evil. Then we'll begin to see what he is actually doing. Now, right now, I don't think we can fully grasp just how powerful God's love truly is. One day, I think we will. And on that day, when we're able to see things really clearly, I think David is saying in this psalm, when we see the true power of love that it's always had, we are going to be in awe and we're going to laugh. And I don't think it's this mocking laugh. I think it'll probably be this laugh of relief when we realize these things that we were so afraid of, these things that we thought were such a threat, never even stood a chance compared to the power of love. If you'll humor me, I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment. And I want you to imagine something. I want you to picture it in your mind. I want you to picture a freight train moving along some tracks. And it's not moving very fast, like maybe just above a walking pace, just like a few miles an hour. So this train moving along the track, this is the steadfast love of God moving forward. And now I want you to picture standing in the path of this train, this large crowd of people. And these people, they love evil. And they are hell-bent on stopping this train. They have gathered together to stop this train. And to do that, they have in their hands the full force of evil. They're holding it in their hands in the form of marshmallows, jumbo-sized. And I want you to picture this train moving forward as this crowd of people starts throwing as hard as they can these marshmallows at the train to get it to stop. Okay, you can open your eyes. I know that's silly, okay? And I'm not trying to minimize the horrific impact of evil either. But I think of things like that when I think of this because I believe when we really see the full power of love compared to the power of evil, the power ratio is going to look something like that. And we're going to realize love never even stood a chance. In 1993, there was this 19-year-old boy named James, and he shot and killed a man during a robbery. And he was caught, and he went to prison. The man he killed had a son whose name was Michael. While James was in prison, Michael spent years just angry and bitter and wanting nothing but revenge against James. But over that time, God started slowly moving in Michael's heart and showing him and teaching him about love and forgiveness to the point where one day Michael visited James in prison and forgave him for taking his dad away. That had such an impact on James that it started this transformation in his life where eventually Michael and James became friends. And after James was released from prison, Michael and James started touring around the country advocating for forgiveness and the prevention of violence. God did not respond to that evil quickly or violently. Instead, in his steadfast love, he started breaking down defensive walls, bringing hidden things out of hiding, and reaching all the way down to the roots of that evil and pulling the whole thing out so it can't return. You can't stop that. Trying to would be like throwing marshmallows at a freight train. David was able to write a psalm of hope in the face of pure evil because he knew how God was responding to that evil. With his steadfast love that always endures, he's uprooting evil with his love. Now, at this point, you could say that's great, but you could also argue this is still just better music to listen to while we wait on hold. But David, he didn't just know something. It seems like he was experiencing something that caused him to write, I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. He wasn't just experiencing hope, he was experiencing life. How? Let's look at verse 8. Look really closely. He writes, but I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. David is not like a green olive tree because of what he knows. He's a green olive tree because of where he is. And where is David? In the house of God. David is taking refuge in God. A refuge is a place of safety and protection. To take refuge in something, you place yourself within that thing. So to take refuge in something, you have to be in the same place as the thing that you are taking refuge in. Like, I can't say right now that in this moment I'm taking refuge in New York City, because I'm not in New York City. I can't say I'm taking refuge inside my house because I am not in my house. And David can't say he's in the house of God unless he's actually in the house of God. But wait a minute, he's not in Jerusalem, he's not in the temple, he's actually on the run getting hunted down, and yet he writes, I am in the house of God. Because the house of God is not in a specific location. The house of God is wherever God is. And so if David is saying that he's in the house of God, then where is God? With David. Because David knows God is with him, he is able to take refuge in him. Because David knows that God is with him, he is in the same place as God, he is able to take refuge in him. In the 23rd Psalm, David writes, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Now you might be thinking, great for David, but what about me? Like when we are feeling hopeless, when we are faced with evil or experiencing it for ourselves, when we are in a boat and we're caught in a storm, one of the first questions we can ask is, God, where are you? Over a month ago, I heard maybe the best sermon I've ever heard before by this brilliant woman. Her name is Danielle Strickland. And in it, she pointed out a couple of things that I had never seen before. These are the first two verses of the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So in Hebrew poetry, the deep or the waters or the ocean is a symbol of chaos, destruction, danger, storm. And in the very first two verses of the Bible, where do we find the Spirit of God? Hovering over the face of the waters. From the very beginning, the nature of God has been to be in the chaos, in the danger and the destruction, in the storm. There's another story about God hovering over the face of the waters, and it's the story of the disciples and Jesus, and they're in a boat, and they're sailing across the sea, and they get caught in a storm, and the disciples are worried that they're going to drown, and they find Jesus sleeping in the boat, and they try to wake him up, saying, don't you even care? And then Jesus wakes up, and he looks at the storm, and he says, stop it. And the storm stops. And then he turns to the disciples, and he asks them a question. Why are you so afraid? Now, I used to think Jesus asked that question because the storm was over. Why are you so afraid? But that doesn't make sense. See, Jesus didn't stop the storm and then ask the question because the storm was over. Jesus stopped the storm so he could ask the question. The disciples' problem wasn't that they were in the storm. The disciples' problem was they didn't know who was in the boat with them. The disciples' peace, Jesus knew, was not going to come from the storm being over. The disciples' peace was going to come from knowing who's in the boat. The disciples didn't need to be afraid, not because the storm was over, but because even in the storm, Jesus was in the boat. David is in a boat in a storm, and he's laughing because he knows who's in the boat. If the very nature of God from the beginning has been to be in the storm, and you are in a boat in a storm, or we collectively are in a boat in a storm, where is God? He is with us. When we can recognize that God is with us, that changes everything. When we can know that the presence of God is here, it changes everything. A couple weeks ago, I read this story about this woman who was in the hospital because her dad was having open heart surgery and things were not going well. And she was pretty sure she was going to lose her dad. And so she started walking around the hospital because what else are you going to do? And she stopped in this hallway and she just looked out this window and she just broke open and she just started sobbing. But as she did, she felt a hand just gently rest on her shoulder. And she didn't turn around to see who it was. She just let it be there. And she said when she felt the hand on her shoulder, she had this just instant sense of peace. And she said they didn't say a word. They didn't try to make anything better. It was just presence. And they stayed there until her sobs kind of subsided and her body began to relax and the hand gently squeezed. And then she heard the person walk away. And she never figured out who it was, but she still thinks about that person 30 years later. That is the power of knowing someone is with us. And if that is the impact of knowing a stranger is with us, and we don't see their face and they don't even say a word, and it's just for a moment, what could be the impact of knowing that God is with us? I am like a green olive tree in the house of God. In the face of evil, we can find hope and even life when we know how God is responding to evil. He is uprooting it with the most powerful force in the universe, his steadfast love, so that it has no hope of returning. And when we know that he is with us, we are not on our own, we are not alone. And because David knew those things, he was able to finish the psalm like this. This is the last verse, verse 9. I will thank you forever because you have done it. I will wait for your name, for it is good in the presence of the godly. For David to be able to say, you have done it before it's over is remarkable. But you see, because David knew what God was doing and he knew that God was with him, it didn't just give him hope and life in the moment in the face of evil. It also reminded him and gave him reassurance of how the story is inevitably going to end. For David, it was as if God had already done it. And likewise with us, when we remember what God is doing in response to evil, and we remember that he is with us, it doesn't just give us hope and life now, but it reminds us and gives us reassurance and confidence in how the story is inevitably going to end. Eventually, God is going to uproot all evil, and the only thing left will be love, and he's going to make all things new. But like David, we're still waiting. It's not the end yet. However, we know something that David didn't know. You see, David, he knew that God was going to do this, but he didn't know how. He didn't know about Jesus. From the beginning, evil had been spreading and corrupting and destroying, but God, in his steadfast love, he didn't respond quickly or violently. Instead, he came to earth as a baby, as Jesus. Satan had been trying to undo and destroy everything that God had made, including you, with sin and death. But then Jesus arrives, and instead of fighting fire with fire, Jesus disarms sin with 3 immeasurably powerful words of love. I forgive you. There is nothing you can do about that. And then he conquers death, but not with more death, but by surrendering to it, by dying, because the steadfast love of God endures everything, even death itself. And Jesus came back. And just like the psalm says, Jesus tore down the defensive walls of evil. He brought it out of hiding. He uprooted it from the land of the living. And then he turns to us and he invites us to join him in uprooting evil with his steadfast love. And he fills us with his Spirit, which causes the love of God to overflow out of us so that we don't just have to hope in the end or wait for it, but we actually get to play a part in bringing it closer. When David saw what Jesus did, I bet he was in awe, and I bet he laughed. If Jesus had come in the time of David, I bet David would have been the first to throw his crown away and say, forget being king. I'm going to go do that. What I'm trying to say is in this psalm, David shows us we can have hope in life, even in the face of evil, when we remember how God is responding to evil with his steadfast love that always endures, and when we remember that God is with us. And that also gives us confidence and reassurance in how the story is going to end. But then Jesus shows up and he invites us to join him in uprooting evil so that we don't just have to hope or wait for the end, but we actually get to participate in its coming. How insane is that? Every Friday night, my family has movie night. And a couple weeks ago, it was Friday, and because our kids are 5 and 7, instead of picking a psychological thriller, we chose Air Bud. And our kids had never seen it before, and I honestly hadn't either. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to spoil it for you. In this movie, there is a dog whose owner is this angry, abusive birthday clown. And the dog runs away for obvious reasons. His owner was an angry, abusive birthday clown. And a boy finds the dog, and they become best friends, and he adopts the dog. But then the birthday clown tracks down the dog. Oh, he's also good at basketball, too. That's like, yeah. So the birthday clown tracks down the dog, and he asks for it back, because technically it's his dog. And there's this scene where the dog runs away from the birthday clown, and the birthday clown is chasing the dog down in his beaten down truck. And it's at this scene that my daughter starts to freak out. Like she's scared. So I grab the remote and I pause the movie and I ask my kids a question. I say, do you think this is how this story is going to end? And with zero hesitation, my son stands up and he says, no, definitely not. I know this story. It has a good ending. Here's the interesting thing. My son had never seen this movie before. But he was able to say that because of 2 things. One, he knew that his mom and dad were with him, so he didn't need to be scared. 2, he knows by now how much we love them. And he knows that we would not allow a movie to continue that concluded with an angry, abusive birthday clown running over a dog in his truck. Okay? And because he trusted in these things, he stood up with no hesitation and defiantly said, as if he was speaking against, oh, this is so cool. It was like he was speaking against fear itself. And he became this wellspring of hope that flowed out of him and washed over his sister and gave her hope. That is the opportunity that we have. My friends, I know that in the part of the movie that we're all in together, that we're at right now, things look a little uncertain and even scary at times. But we can have hope and even life when we remember how God is responding to evil and when we know that he is with us. And this gives us confidence and reassurance in how the story will end. But Jesus has invited us to even join him and participate in its coming so that when the people around us start to get freaked out and scared, and they ask the question, is this how the story is going to end? We can stand up and say, no, definitely not. I know this story. It has a good ending. My friends, evil exists. There have been some terrible things happening lately. But please don't lose hope, because the steadfast love of God endures forever and ever. He is tearing down evil's defensive walls. He is bringing it out of hiding. He is uprooting it from the land of the living. You are like green olive trees in the house of God. Thank God he has done it. Let's wait together for the ending, because this story has a good one. But let's not just wait for it. Let's follow Jesus into the storm. Let's hover over the face of the waters, and let's uproot evil with him with his steadfast love. Will you please pray with me? Before we pray a word, if you're able to, would you stand with me? And as you're standing, would you hold your hands out in front of you in just a posture of openness if you feel comfortable doing that? And let's just give God an opportunity to say or do whatever he wants to do for just a moment. So Holy Spirit, right now in this place of openness, we invite you to come here and just speak whatever you want to say or do whatever you want to do. We are open and we are listening. In this moment, there's a question you could ask Jesus and just see how he responds. The question could go something like, Jesus, is there chaos somewhere near me that I could bring hope to? You can just wait for a moment and see how he responds to that. Jesus, I pray for any of my friends here who have lost hope, who have given up, who are tired of waiting, and they don't want to watch anymore. Jesus, you can cause life to sprout up out of the most infertile ground. And I ask that you would do that in the hearts of anyone here that's feeling that way. You would give them a sense of hope again. That you would point out the things that they should be looking for. That you would give them the eyes to see what they should watch for. That they wouldn't just see evil causing havoc, but they would see your love slowly and powerfully washing over things, uprooting things. And Jesus, I pray for my friends in this room that are just feeling scared. They need to feel your hand on their shoulder, so to speak. They just need to know that you're here. As much as we can try to open ourselves up to that reality, I think it always comes down to you just making that super obvious. So I ask for my friends that are here that are feeling scared and they need to know that you are here, that you would show them that that's true. In whatever way it speaks to their heart, would you just show them that you are here? Jesus, we pray that these things would soak in and sink in so that we could have hope and life and reassurance that doesn't just give us peace, but it brings us to a place where we can gladly stand up and accept your invitation to join you in uprooting evil with your love. You are so gracious and understanding with us. You know what we're ready for and not ready for. Maybe we just need to take a baby step towards this. And if so, thank God. But for those of us who are ready to no longer just wait or hope, but actually participate in its coming, would you speak to our hearts and would you show us the direction to go and the words to speak and what to do? Because we are excited to join you in that. Jesus, it's with this hope and reassurance of what's to come that we are able to worship you. So as we step into this time of worship, I just want you to know if you would like to come up here and worship or pray, you are welcome to. And if you do, there are people up front here who might come alongside you and just join in whatever God is doing in your heart. They might pray for you or they might just be with you. But I just wanted to make sure that you know that this is an open space. So let's worship together.
So wherever you are coming out of today's message with Pastor Stetson, we just want you to know that you are not walking alone, and we would love to walk alongside of you. We would love to pray for you and just hear your story. So we encourage you, again, head over to our website. We have a chat button at the bottom of our website, and there's somebody on the other side that is eager to engage with you. You're also welcome to email us here at the church. We just want to let you know that we would love to have you a part of our family. So please connect with us, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.